In a hall full of crystal and vows, one woman noticed the bride's hands were shaking. Claire stood beneath golden light, watching Evelyn smile in a dress that looked like freedom and felt like a funeral. Leon kissed his bride like a man claiming property, not love. And by the end of that night, the music had faded, the doors had locked, and Claire understood the terrible truth. She had not attended a wedding. She had walked into the opening scene of a tragedy that would steal years of her life.
The case study begins. Evelyn Carter approached the architect of her own gilded cage. The sole observer was Claire Bennett, who recognized the pathology for what it was. Within this space, Claire registered the tremor in her friend's hand, a signifier of unseen brutalities. Yet she could not foresee her own fate being woven into this very tapestry of coercion. She failed to detect the predatory nature beneath Leon Moretti's polished facade, oblivious that the doors had already sealed her inside. This is an examination of a bond forged in subjugation, a deep dive into the subtle mechanics of a narcissist's dominion. It starts here. The estate, a monument to control, was crafted to suffocate the human spirit. Claire Bennett, her knuckles pale against her purse, felt her own breathing falter in its suffocating grandeur. Their bond was forged in university, a peculiar alchemy between two contrary spirits. Evelyn was a whirlwind of impulse and mirth, Claire a silent harbor of prudence. 6 months prior, a phone call fractured that equilibrium. Evelyn's voice, a fragile filament of dread, was a call to arms Claire could not refuse. That singular, desperate appeal ignited a devotion that outshone her own survival instinct. Arriving now, she felt spectral, an apparition at a grand illusion, her unadorned presence a stark reality amid the glittering deceptions of affluence. The atmosphere itself was dense with a privilege she had never encountered, rendering her insignificant, alien, and utterly alone. The seamless solidarity of the attendees formed a barrier, entombing Claire in her isolation. She attempted to dissolve into the background, a survival mechanism honed in childhood. When Evelyn at last emerged, it was like oxygen in a void, a fleeting respite. But the relief curdled almost immediately. Evelyn was a beautiful, devastating paradox. Her face, a canvas of perfection, could not conceal the trauma haunting her eyes. Her smile was a mask of civility devoid of warmth, and her skin felt cold, chilled by a perpetual, invisible dread. Her opening words were a loyalty test, swiftly followed by a fragile denial of the horror etched onto her features. Claire's intuition screamed a reality her mind struggled to accept. This was not pre-wedding anxiety. It was the preamble to a sacrifice. The emotion had a name: terror. When Claire inquired about the groom, Leon, a nerve twitched in Evelyn's jaw as her speech fragmented. She described the union as a cold transaction, a fusion of power and capital, while her gaze ceaselessly swept the room, perpetually scanning for a threat. Her plea for Claire to remain near was a muted cry for help before a handler deftly intervened. Evelyn's last wild-eyed glance was a signal that never arrived, a distress flare snuffed out before it could register. A cold sickness coiled in Claire's gut. During the rite, the juxtaposition was profane. The immaculate elegance of the setting against the violent, uncontrolled shaking of Evelyn's hands as the ring, a perfect golden fetter, was eased onto her finger. The trembling persisted as the groom, Leon Moretti, concluded the ceremony, his hand closing over the nape of her neck not as a caress, but as an act of absolute possession. His features were sculpted from granite, his suit and armor of cold dominion. The expression he gave his new bride held no affection, only the proprietary satisfaction of an acquisition, the hallmark of a predator. Claire suppressed a wave of nausea. In that instant, Evelyn receded, her eyes becoming glass, her face a lovely vacant facade. The reception was a theatrical performance of manufactured bliss, where every smile was policed. From a shadowed table, Claire observed them, her focus locked on the couple. The aggressor, Leon, maintained his arm around Evelyn, a ceaseless physical assertion of his control. He conversed with an elder gentleman while Evelyn remained suspended in a kind of waking death, her expression inert. Then a new figure approached Claire's table, a man in his early 30s. He was a study in contrasts, with a disarming smile and eyes that clinically deconstructed all they surveyed. He introduced himself as Vincent Moretti, the groom's cousin. Claire's guard immediately rose. When he inquired about her impression of the wedding, she offered a well-rehearsed falsehood. Vincent perceived the deception instantly, and Claire's heart began to pound. He noted that her authentic concern was an anomaly in this palace of perfect fictions. Claire deflected with a different narrative, one he appeared to accept, allowing the subject to drop. "We outsiders must remain cohesive," he remarked before departing, the statement a curious proposition of solidarity. The night's charade wore on. Claire noted Evelyn's rigid posture and static smile during their stance, a public exhibition of her capitulation. Reaching her own limit, Claire escaped the ballroom to locate her. She found Evelyn standing alone, gazing into a dark window, a figure of complete desolation. Evelyn's initial panicked words were not of comfort, but of fear at being discovered, betraying the constant surveillance she endured. Claire's direct appeal finally shattered the facade, and Evelyn collapsed, the immense tension releasing from her body in a wave of quiet capitulation. The narrative emerged in a voice drained of all life. The marriage was a settlement. Her father was indebted to Leon's family, with the alternative being his demise. The ground shifted beneath Claire's feet. Evelyn spoke of her confinement as if its walls were immutable, the lock beyond breaking. She laughed, a harsh, discordant sound, at Claire's suggestion of involving the authorities, exposing a profound certainty that Leon existed beyond the reach of any law. The tether around her neck was a direct threat against her father's existence. Then, in a classic victim's response, she tried to protect her friend by severing their connection, insisting Claire flee, forget her, and abandon her to the darkness. Claire would not let go. "We have to address this." The door swung open. It was Leon. His expression was affable, but his eyes were hard as flint. "They've located you. Our guests are inquiring about you." Evelyn's entire demeanor shifted. The terror evaporated, supplanted by a brittle, flawless smile. "Of course. I was just bidding farewell to Claire. She is departing." "Is she now?" Leon's attention pivoted to Claire. "A pity. The festivities are only just commencing." "I must return to my hotel," Claire stated, her voice a taut filament of composure. "I have a morning flight." "Nonsense." Leon entered the room. "You are Evelyn's dearest friend. You must spend the night. We have ample space." "It was not a proposition. It was a decree." "That is very generous," Claire replied carefully. "But I have already secured my accommodations." "I insist." Leon's smile did not falter. "Evelyn would be shattered if I permitted such a breach of hospitality. Isn't that right, my dear?" Evelyn offered a minute nod, avoiding Claire's gaze. "The matter is therefore settled." Offering his arm, Leon addressed Evelyn. "We should return. The next course is being served." She accepted it, and as they moved past Claire, Evelyn murmured, "I am so sorry," before they vanished. Claire remained alone in the parlor, a subtle tremor vibrating through her body. The only logical impulse was to escape, locate an exit, summon a car, and vanish into the night. But the specter of Evelyn's expression, the unadulterated fear in her eyes, was an imprint that refused to fade. She could not abandon her. Claire started to move, bypassing the main hall and instead navigating the arteries of the mansion, attempting to orient herself within the vast labyrinth of corridors and closed doors. She moved past staff who offered her barely a look. Disoriented and seeking a way out, she rounded a corner and collided with Vincent Moretti. "Take care." His hand darted out, grasping her elbow. "Mind your step." "My apologies." Claire withdrew immediately. Vincent's eyes searched her face. "You appear to have seen a specter." "I am merely a bit disoriented. I was attempting to find an exit." Vincent's expression remained unreadable. "That can prove challenging in this place." A cold knot of apprehension tightened in Claire's stomach. "What are you implying?" "This way." He indicated another door. "We must speak in private." Every instinct urged her to flee, but Vincent was already in motion, and she was utterly lost. She complied. He guided her into a small, dust-filled library flanked by what looked like priceless, ancient volumes. He closed the door and stood against it, obstructing the sole escape route. "You are trying to determine if I am trustworthy," he observed. Claire remained silent. "A prudent impulse. Trust is a perilous asset in this family. Nevertheless, I am going to give you some counsel because I witnessed your expression as you watched Evelyn during the ceremony." "I am concerned for her," Claire stated, her voice hushed. "Then comprehend this. Leon's union with Evelyn is not about romance. It is a commercial arrangement to resolve her father's debt and to display his own influence. This is the family's modus operandi. Everything is a negotiation. Everyone is designated as either an asset or a liability." "Why are you divulging this to me?" "Because you are on the verge of becoming a liability." Vincent moved away from the door and began to pace the tight quarters. "Leon does not tolerate unresolved variables, and you, Claire Bennett, are a significant unresolved variable. You know too much, you feel too much, and you are not a member of the family." The saliva in Claire's mouth evaporated. "I am departing tomorrow." "No, you are not." The words resonated in the air with the weight of a final judgment. "What are you saying?" The inquiry was a barely audible vibration of sound. Vincent halted, his gaze locking onto hers. "Leon has people monitoring you. Did you genuinely believe you could simply exit this place, enter a taxi, and return home? That is not going to occur. Leon has identified a purpose for you." "A purpose for what?" "Leverage." The muscle in Vincent's jaw tightened. "Over Evelyn. With your presence here, she will be compliant. She will not flee. She will not resist. She understands that if she does, you will be the one who bears the consequences." The room seemed to cant beneath Claire's feet. "No, that is preposterous. I am a nobody. I don't—" "You are her closest friend. This makes you a figure of immense importance." Vincent drew closer, his voice a low, urgent whisper. "Heed my words. When they arrive for you, and they will arrive shortly, offer no resistance. Do not create a disturbance. Accompany them. Your level of cooperation will directly influence the quality of your treatment." "You expect me to simply allow them to take me?" "My expectation is that you remain alive." Claire's breathing became a series of short, frantic gasps. This felt like a delusion. It was meant to be a wedding, a brief visit. She was scheduled to return to her unassuming job, her tranquil existence by Monday. I need to contact someone, she managed to say. I must. Whom? Vincent offered a bleak laugh. The household staff. They are Leon's employees. The guests. They are either his kin or too intimidated to intervene. The authorities? They are on his payroll. He stepped away, his posture conveying a sense of grim inevitability. No one is coming to your rescue. Claire, there is only you and the choices you make in the coming moments. Before a reply could form, the sound of heavy footfalls resounded in the corridor. Vincent clutched her arm. Recall what I told you. Do not struggle. He vanished through a side entrance she hadn't noticed, leaving Claire isolated as the primary library door swung inward. Two imposing men entered, their broad frames straining the fabric of suits that poorly concealed their armaments. One offered a smile, a gesture devoid of warmth, full of predatory intent. Miss Bennet, he stated, Mr. Moretti requests your presence. Claire's fists tightened at her sides. I was just returning to the celebration. Your itinerary has been altered. The man moved aside, indicating the hallway. If you would please come with us. Every instinct urged her to flee, but no escape route existed. She envisioned Evelyn's expression, replayed Vincent's caution in her mind, and began to walk. They did not escort her toward the ballroom. Instead, they led her deeper into the estate, down an unfamiliar passage, toward a formidable door of dark wood at its end. One of the men knocked twice. Enter, Leon's voice ordered. The door opened. The room was a study appointed with dark wood and opulent leather, its walls lined with books and fine spirits. Leon was seated behind a large desk, his suit jacket removed and his tie loosened. He appeared entirely relaxed. Claire? He indicated the chair opposite him. Please, sit. Claire remained standing. What is happening here? Sit down. The word was a command, not an invitation. She sat. He poured a drink for himself, utterly ignoring her. I am led to believe you and Evelyn are quite close. We are friends. My intelligence suggests you are best friends. Leon took a drink, his eyes fixed on her over the glass. She confides in you. Claire did not respond. That is a precious commodity, Leon went on. Trust, allegiance. Evelyn has precious little of that in her life. Only you. If you harm her? Leon arched a brow. I have just married her. Why would I cause injury to my own wife? Then release me. That is not possible. The casualness of his tone sent a current of ice through Claire's body. You have no legal right to detain me, she said, her voice trembling faintly. People are aware of my presence here, my work, my family. They will report me missing. Is that so? Leon leaned back. Your dossier indicates you reside alone. You hold a quiet administrative position. Your parents are deceased. You have no siblings or partner. He smirked at her reaction. I am thorough in my preparations, Claire. You are an apparition. No one will even submit a report. The room's walls seemed to close in around her. What is it you want from me? She whispered. I want you to remain here, be a companion to Evelyn, support her, assist in her acclimation to this new life. Leon placed his glass down. In exchange, you will live in great comfort, a fine room, excellent food, whatever you require. Your sole responsibility is to be compliant. And my answer is no. His expression remained unchanged, but his eyes became flat and cold. In that event, Evelyn will be distressed, and you will be distressed, and the circumstances will become deeply unpleasant for all involved. He rose and put on his jacket. But you are an intelligent woman. You will make the prudent choice. He walked to the door, stopping beside her. You will be shown to your room. Get some sleep. We will review the regulations tomorrow. He departed. Claire sat frozen, her mind struggling to comprehend a reality that had abruptly ceased to cohere. This was not meant to occur, not to a person like her, not in the real world. Yet the locked door, the guards stationed outside, the absolute terror on Evelyn's face. It was all devastatingly authentic. She was a captive. She walked. The chamber they assigned her was beautiful in a manner that was suffocating. A massive 4-poster bed, carpets that absorbed all sound, and windows that framed pristine gardens. It would be a perfect room, were the windows not sealed and a guard not stationed just beyond her door. Claire stood still in her navy dress, suppressing the scream that rose in her throat. She required a strategy, an exit from this gilded prison, but she had no knowledge of the estate, of the security, and her phone was missing. They had confiscated her purse. She was isolated entirely and profoundly. A gentle knock startled her. "Come in," she said, her voice steady. The door opened. Evelyn entered, an apparition in her wedding dress, and secured the lock behind her. "I cannot stay long," she whispered. "Leon is with his relatives, but he will notice a prolonged absence." Evelyn collapsed the space between them, her hands finding Claire's. "We are compelled to escape," she urged, before hope withered in her expression. "No, it's impossible." As Claire began to protest, Evelyn's voice fractured. "I attempted to flee. Before the ceremony, they captured me, and I was forced to witness what they did to my helpers. I cannot endure that a second time." "What is our path forward?" Tears traced paths down her cheeks. "We endure. It is all we are permitted. We survive, we observe, and perhaps, one day..." The thought remained unfinished. "I am so sorry for drawing you into this. I only desired a single, final moment of normalcy before..." Her voice dissolved into the quiet. Claire drew her into an embrace, and Evelyn sagged against her, her body racked with silent, violent sobs. "We will discover a way," Claire swore, with no concept of how. "A way always exists. I promise you." Evelyn withdrew, wiping at her eyes. "I must leave. If Leon discovers me here..." "Go, it's all right." At the doorway, Evelyn paused, a final haunted image etched in her eyes. "The days in this place exist in a dichotomy. They are either tolerable or they are hell," she breathed. "On tolerable days, a measure of freedom is granted. On the bad days..." She let the words hang. "Simply obey every command, Claire. Please, do not resist them. Do not become a hero. Just survive." And with that, she vanished. The room's silence became a crushing weight on Claire, her heart a frantic hammer against her ribs. Survive. The mission had been redefined. Not liberation, not rescue, but simply to continue breathing. She moved to the window, placing a hand against the cold pane. Night had consumed the estate, rendering the mountains into jagged silhouettes. Far below in the valley, a world she could no longer touch shimmered like a remote galaxy. Claire shut her eyes, her breath unsteady, recalling her former existence, her apartment, her books, her career, the serene rhythm of her life, a life she would give anything to reclaim, a life pilfered by a man who curated people as if they were art. Then, a new, colder awareness crystallized. Leon had been thorough in his research. He knew she was isolated, that no one would initiate a search. He had selected her for her ghostly presence, a woman who avoided attention, who lived her life striving to be invisible. Her absence would create no disturbance. Claire opened her eyes. Very well. If Leon equated quiet with weak, he was mistaken. If he anticipated her to break, he was in for a long wait. She had no idea how, no strategy had formed, but she would extract them both from this place. The immediate goal was simply to stay alive until an opportunity arose. Dawn arrived without fanfare. Claire had not slept, having paced through the night, constructing and deconstructing futile plans. As the initial gray light permeated the room, she felt utterly depleted. A knock sounded. "Miss Bennet?" A woman's voice, sharp and detached. "Breakfast has been served. You are awaited downstairs. Please dress." Claire glanced at her attire. The dress from the previous day was a wrinkled mess. "I have no other clothing," she called out. "Examine the wardrobe." Claire opened the closet doors. It contained an assortment of apparel, dresses, blouses, trousers, all in her size, all of a costly, refined style far beyond her means. A feeling of nausea swept over her. This was all a component of his design. She selected a plain gray dress and a white cardigan, dressed with haste, and opened the door. The attendant was an older woman, around 50, with perceptive eyes and a manner of detached professionalism. "I am Mrs. Kovash, the housekeeper. This way." She guided Claire to a sunlit breakfast room. Lane was seated at the head of the table, perusing a newspaper. He looked up at her entrance and smiled. "Good morning, Claire. I hope you rested well." Claire offered no response. His smile vanished. "Sit, eat, we must converse." She chose a chair at the opposite end of the long table. Mrs. Kovacs poured coffee and served her a plate. Though a visceral fear constricted her gut, Claire was consumed by hunger, a biological imperative overriding emotion. She nibbled at a pastry under Leon's unwavering gaze. "The framework is elementary," he stated. "You are my ward, perpetually observed. The grounds are your world, but you will not venture beyond them. You will attend family meals as summoned and serve as Evelyn's companion. All contact with the outside is forbidden." "And my refusal?" "Refusal nullifies your courtesies. This room becomes a cell. Your freedom of movement revoked. Evelyn, in turn, will bear the cost of your defiance." Leon set aside his newspaper. "But you will not refuse. You grasp the calculus of this situation, and your loyalty to your friend is your leash." Claire put down the croissant. "For how long?" "How long is what?" "How long must I remain in this place?" Leon paused. "Your own compliance dictates the terms. Cooperate, and your confinement will be bearable. Resist, and it will be anything but. As for your departure," he offered a shrug, "that remains at my discretion." The casual despotism of his words was suffocating. "You cannot do this," she uttered, her voice a fragile tremor. "This is madness. You can't simply abduct people." "I can do precisely as I wish, Claire." Leon's tone was glacial. "The quicker you internalize that reality, the simpler this becomes for all involved." He rose, adjusting his jacket. "Evelyn will be down for luncheon. Until then, acquaint yourself with the estate. Consider it your new reality." He abandoned her there, amidst cooling coffee and the wreckage of her former existence. Time began to coagulate into a monotonous cycle. Claire assimilated the state's rigid cadence. Breakfast, often with Leon, lunch with Evelyn when permitted, dinner a tense affair with the whole unnerving clan and their associates. She mastered the art of being invisible, of speaking only when addressed, of minimizing her own presence. It was, as Evelyn noted, an exercise in survival. Some days were more tolerable than others. Good days meant solitude. On bad days, Leon's temper was a low-pressure system threatening the entire household. Claire observed, she processed, and she absorbed. She noted Vincent's nightly appearances, his courteous yet remote manner, a carefully constructed facade. She deduced that Leon's uncle, Marcello, was the true center of gravity in the family's opaque enterprises. She realized the staff were silent observers to everything, and that no simple exit existed. The estate was a veritable fortress, fortified by walls and gates, monitored by guards and cameras at every turn. Beyond its perimeter lay miles of hostile mountain wilderness. Despite this, she watched, anticipating a fissure in their defenses. She needed to be prepared. 3 weeks following the wedding, Vincent located her in the library. It had become her afternoon refuge, a quiet space where the guards were absent and the books offered a fleeting reprieve. "You are quite the reader," Vincent noted, settling into the opposite chair. Claire saved her page. "There are a few other diversions." "You might attempt an escape." Claire's pulse hammered against her ribcage. "Is this a form of interrogation?" "No, merely an observation." Vincent leaned back, his gaze analytical. "Most individuals in your circumstances would have tried by now, but you are simply waiting, because my assessment is I wouldn't get 10 feet. A corner of Vincent's mouth lifted. "Your assessment is accurate." A long silence expanded between them. "Why are you present at all?" Claire eventually inquired. "Here, at this estate, you do not fit." "I don't," Vincent concurred, his expression hardening. "But lineage is binding, and this family does not permit departures." "So we are both captives, in a sense?" Vincent released a short, mirthless laugh. "Yes, I suppose that is what we are." He made a move to stand, but then paused. "For what it's worth, you are enduring this better than most." "I don't feel as if I'm enduring it at all." "That is the nature of survival. You are unaware you are doing it until hindsight reveals you remain." He turned to the door again, then stopped once more. "The groundskeeper neglects to lock the south gate on Thursdays, around midnight, for your information." Claire's heart pounded. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I'm weary of watching this family shatter things," he said. "And because you evoke the memory of someone I once knew, someone who was owed a better fate." Vincent's jaw tightened. "The knowledge is now yours." He vanished. Claire remained motionless, the book on her lap, an inert object. His words resonated, outlining a specific opportunity. Thursday, midnight, South Gate. It was likely a trap. Still, it represented the first crack of light she had seen since her world had shrunk to these walls. The image of Evelyn's face surfaced, trailed by the cold echo of Leon's vow to make her pay for any defiance. Her past life felt like a distant phantom. Thursday was 2 days away, 48 hours to weigh whether this was an act of courage or a march to ruin. That Wednesday evening, she lay sleepless, her gaze mapping the shadows above, deconstructing the potential escape. The risk was astronomical. Vincent could be baiting a trap. Even if the gate was open, what lay beyond? She would be cast into an unforgiving night, with recapture all but guaranteed. Yet the prospect of indefinite imprisonment, of witnessing Evelyn's spirit erode, was a more profound terror, When Thursday dawned, the decision had solidified. She would attempt it. Breakfast was a study in controlled fury. Leon was absorbed by his phone, its screen casting an agitated light on his features. The arrival of Marcello and his whispered exchange only intensified Leon's mood into something volatile. Business matters. Claire's inquiry sliced the quiet, Leon's gaze fixed on her. It is of no concern to you. I understand. Claire sipped her coffee. Leon abruptly stood. I have appointments all day. Do not expect me for dinner. He departed without further comment. Claire tracked his exit, a metronome beginning to count in her chest. His preoccupation was an unforeseen advantage, a hairline fracture in the architecture of her confinement. She navigated the remainder of the day like a ghost of herself, sharing a midday meal with Evelyn, who appeared wan and fragile, her eyes ringed with exhaustion. Are you getting any sleep? Claire asked gently. Not much. Evelyn listlessly moved food on her plate. Leon is on edge. A certain venture has soured. The specifics are unclear, but his disposition makes avoidance prudent. Has he harmed you? Evelyn's lack of response was an answer in itself. Claire reached over, her fingers enveloping Evelyn's hand. I am getting us away from here. Claire, don't. Evelyn's grasp became frantic. I know your thoughts. Do not act on them. They will find you. They invariably do. But what if this time they don't? They will. Evelyn's voice was unsteady. And when they do, Leon will use you, use us, to set an example. I cannot bear to witness that. Claire concealed the truth about the gate. In the event of her failure, Evelyn's ignorance would be her only protection. It was only a notion, Claire lied, the words tasting of defeat. I'm not planning anything. Evelyn seemed unconvinced, but released her hand. That afternoon, Claire returned to her room to begin her preparations. Every action had to be undetectable. She pulled leggings on under her skirt and a thin shirt beneath her blouse, creating a layered armor. She tucked a small water bottle into her cardigan pocket, a small, tangible link to the world she sought. At dinner, she was alone. The cavernous dining room seemed to amplify Leon's absence. Mrs. Kovac presented the meal, her expression a study in professional detachment. Will Mr. Moretti be back tonight? Claire inquired. That is not for me to know, miss. Claire gave a slight nod, feigning an appetite. When Mrs. Kovac returned, Claire deployed her strategy. I am feeling unwell. I believe I will retire for the night. The housekeeper's eyes narrowed imperceptibly. Should I summon the physician? No, it is merely fatigue. As you wish. Mrs. Kovac took the plates. Rest well, miss. Claire proceeded to her room, closed the door, and commenced her vigil. The large house gradually succumbed to slumber around her. The ambient sounds of the halls subsided. By 11, the stillness was total. She changed into her escape attire, black pants and a dark sweater, the uniform of a shadow. She left a single lamp on, arranging pillows beneath the comforter to form a decoy of her sleeping form. Opening the door a fraction, she listened to the profound quiet. Then she slid into the corridor, moving with the fluidity of mist. Her room was in the east wing. The gate was situated on the opposite side of the estate, a formidable distance across the main level. The hallway was a channel of dim light and deep shadow. Claire flattened herself against the wall, her heart beating a frantic rhythm she feared was audible. She arrived at the grand staircase without being seen. Below was the marble foyer, and adjacent to it, a security post. An impasse. Claire retreated into the gloom, doubling back toward a service staircase. It was a constricted, unlit passage leading to the kitchens. From that point, she could access the garden entrance. A step creaked beneath her foot. Claire's body registered the primal urge to flee, but the mansion's silence imposed its own discipline. She pressed on. Through a kitchen devoid of life, she reached the garden door, a barrier confirming her imprisonment. A surge of panic gave way to a methodical search for an escape tool. Her fingers found a ring of keys, the fifth of which turned the lock, opening a path to the cold night. She ran not blindly, but through a garden whose layout she had committed to memory, a mental blueprint for liberation. A guard's light cut through the dark, a brief, terrifying interlude where her fate hung on his oblivious patrol. Once the guard passed, Claire resumed her movement. The south gate stood as a skeletal promise of freedom, its iron form tangled in ivy. The padlock, hanging open as Vincent had described, was a symbol of his fractured allegiance. She reached for it, but a voice cut through the stillness. It was Vincent, a shadow given form 10 feet away, questioning her destination. He confirmed his words, but framed them within the context of a potential trap, testing her resolve. Her answer was simple. She had considered the risk and found it acceptable. Her desperation outweighed her fear. Vincent paused, evaluating her, then produced a phone. It was an unexpected tool for survival. He offered instructions, a path to a ranger station, and an emergency line, a lifeline to the outside world. To Claire's questioning gaze, he revealed his motive, a profound disillusionment with the family's destructive cycle. This act was his resignation. Pressing the phone into her hand, he urged her to leave before his resolve could waver. When she voiced concern for Evelyn, he offered a cold, practical logic that Claire was useless to her friend while captive. He dismissed the risk to himself, outlining a plausible narrative of her escape, in which he was merely an unsuccessful pursuer. With the final, "Go," he severed their brief alliance. Claire fled into the woods. Adrenaline eclipsed fear as she ran. The singular goal of the ranger station burned in her mind. 2 miles. The shouts from behind confirmed the discovery of the open gate. She accelerated. On the treacherous trail, she activated the phone's light, a tactical error that destroyed her night vision. Plunging back into darkness, she felt her lungs and legs burn. Here, terror became a powerful, if unsustainable, fuel. As the trail descended, she fell, the sharp gravel tearing her palms. She suppressed a cry and kept moving. The pursuers were closer now, their voices tightening the net. Hope began to fray as her body reached its limit, making capture seem inevitable. Then, a break in the trees revealed a clearing and a small cabin, the ranger station. A final surge of desperate energy propelled her inside. The air was stale, the sudden light of a fluorescent bulb harsh and revealing. Her eyes found the objective, a red emergency radio box on the wall. Tearing it open, she seized the handset. A dial tone, a ring, and then a voice. Her confession spilled out in a torrent. An abduction, her name, Claire Bennett, and her captors, Leon Moretti. She was pleading for help when the door exploded inward. 2 guards seized her, their strength overwhelming her resistance. One ripped the phone away, severing her connection to rescue. A hand smothered her scream as Leon appeared, his expression not of anger, but of mild annoyance at a problem to be solved. He gave a quiet command. They dragged her to a waiting vehicle, its engine already running. Inside, Leon sat beside her, his men in the front. As the car climbed back toward the estate, he began a clinical deconstruction of her escape attempt. He questioned its futility, not seeking a reply. He informed her the emergency call, while logged, would be dismissed as a prank, its data erased. When she noted her name was recorded, he shrugged it off as irrelevant information soon to be lost in the system. His detachment was absolute. He detailed his control over the local authorities, confirming her call for help had been intercepted and nullified, a statement that visibly crushed her last hope. Leon then correctly deduced Vincent's involvement, labeling it a predictable weakness. Claire's involuntary flinch at the mention of Vincent was a silent plea for his safety, which Leon met with a smile that promised retribution. Shifting the topic from Vincent's certain punishment, he began to dissect the psychological fallout. He noted Evelyn's self-blame, a burden Claire now carried as well. Her immediate appeal for Evelyn's safety was met with his assurance that the consequences would fall upon Claire alone. "But you," he said, his smile widening, "are another matter entirely." At the house, she was taken not to her room, but deep underground. The cell was an exercise in sensory deprivation, a windowless concrete box containing only a cot and a bucket. The heavy door sealed her in. Leon observed her reaction as he explained the terms of her confinement. She would remain there until he deemed her corrected. Food would arrive twice daily, but light, sound, and human interaction were forbidden. She was to be isolated with her failure. When she asked for how long, he gave no answer. He closed the door, and her world became absolute darkness, a classic methodology for breaking the human spirit. In the total darkness, Claire's sense of time disintegrated, a predictable outcome of the isolation. The only markers were the twice-daily delivery of a food tray through a slot. Her existence became a cycle of exhausted sleep and agitated pacing, her mind replaying the failed escape. A chilling realization formed. Leon had orchestrated the entire scenario, allowing her the illusion of hope only to amplify the devastation of its removal. It was a study in calculated psychological cruelty. After an immeasurable period, the door opened. The sudden light was a physical shock. A guard stood silhouetted, his instructions brief. Claire's atrophied muscles failed her. She required his support to even stand. The guard escorted her to the main house, where the ambient light induced vertigo. In a bathroom, she was given a simple command: 15 minutes to wash and change into the provided clothes. The locked door emphasized her lack of autonomy. Her reflection showed a stranger, marked by pallor and stress, her eyes aged. She complied. The clothes were nondescript. Afterward, she was led to the dining room, where Leon sat at breakfast. He gestured for her to join him. She obeyed mechanically, her appetite gone. After a period of quiet observation, he inquired if her re-education was finished. Her whispered yes was the sound of a personality deconstructed. Good. Leon sipped his coffee. I've decided to permit a supervised visit with Evelyn. Claire's head lifted at the name. He confirmed her friend was physically unharmed but emotionally wrecked, a state he attributed directly to Claire's actions and Evelyn's resulting guilt. The intended weight of this responsibility settled visibly on Claire. Leon granted her request to see Evelyn, contingent on finishing her meal. He then outlined the new paradigm: constant surveillance, nightly lockdown, and the promise of far graver consequences for any future defiance. Her quiet acquiescence was met with a sharp demand for sincerity, as he reframed his cruelty as a necessary response to her own behavior. She requires you here. Your presence pacifies her, which in turn simplifies my existence. Your comfort is a matter of my convenience. But if forced to decide between that convenience and your compliance, I will choose compliance every time. I will not attempt to escape again, Claire stated, the words a hollow capitulation. I am aware, Leon answered with a thin smile. You now comprehend the price. He left her with her meal. She had physically survived the encounter, but her resolve had been systematically dismantled. Evelyn was waiting in the parlor. Upon seeing Claire, relief washed over her features. They came together in a fervent embrace. This is because of me, Evelyn wept. I should have dissuaded you. No, Claire interjected, turning to face her. You bear no responsibility for this. This was my decision, my error. Leon informed me you were in the basement. He forbade me from seeing you. He said I had to wait until you were re-educated. Evelyn's voice cracked. I was terrified. I am fine now. I am here. They sat on the sofa, their hands interlocked. Claire's guard remained by the door like a statue. Did he harm you? Evelyn asked in a hushed tone. No, only confinement. And Vincent? A frigid sense of apprehension settled in Claire's stomach. What of him? Leon dismissed him. He claimed Vincent was disloyal, that he assisted you. Tears cascaded down Evelyn's cheeks. Is that true? Claire's throat constricted. Vincent had sacrificed everything for her. He mentioned the gate, she conceded, but I pressured him. He attempted to dissuade me. It was a falsehood, but it was the only protection she could offer him now. Leon has been suspicious since your flight, Evelyn went on. He believes there is an informant in the family. He has been interrogating everyone. It has been a complete nightmare. I am profoundly sorry. The word sounded hollow, inadequate. You tried to escape, Evelyn noted. You came closer than anyone I have witnessed. For a brief instant, I believed you might actually succeed. I did not succeed. True, but you made the attempt. That is far more than I have ever done. A profound silence descended upon them, both crushed by the unassailable reality of their cage. What is to become of us now? Claire eventually asked. We persevere, Evelyn replied, her voice an empty echo. It is the only course available. Claire felt an urge to object, to champion something more than mere survival, but the recollection of the cellar, of the absolute blackness, had taught her the cost of such hope. She simply tightened her grip on her friend's hand and remained silent. The weeks that followed solidified into a new bleak pattern. Claire was never permitted to be alone. A guard was her perpetual shadow at night. Her door was secured from the outside. The windows of her new chamber were reinforced with iron bars. She was a captive more thoroughly than ever before, and she performed the role Leon assigned her, quiet, compliant, and utterly broken. She took her meals with Evelyn and cataloged library books, making appearances at family dinners as required. She only spoke when addressed directly, a specter moving through the halls. Leon appeared content. The defiant spark from her escape had been extinguished. She was once again a possession, on display, but unregarded. Claire allowed him to relish the delusion of his victory. But in the solitude of her locked room, she replayed Vincent's words, the call that nearly broke through, the tantalizing proximity of freedom. Failure had imparted a crucial truth. Her strength was greater than any of them perceived, and in time, that would prove significant. 2 months after the event, Evelyn arrived at lunch carrying news. I am with child, she announced quietly, a hand resting upon her abdomen. The air evacuated Claire's lungs. Is Leon aware? I informed him this morning. He is pleased. Evelyn's smile was a vacant gesture. He desires an heir. This will mollify him. And your own feelings? A long quiet stretched between them. I am terrified, she confessed at last. I do not want to bring a child into this house, into his world, but I am afforded no choice. Claire extended her hand across the table, covering Evelyn's. You are going to be a magnificent mother. Will I? Evelyn's voice was unsteady. How can I shield a child when I am incapable of shielding myself? You will discover a way. We both will. It was a pledge Claire had no means to fulfill, but she made it nonetheless because pledges are sometimes all one has. The pregnancy altered both everything and nothing. Leon's demeanor toward Evelyn softened in the initial months. His hand would find her stomach at the dinner table, his voice taking on a gentler cadence. Claire observed this with a chilling sense of unease, knowing it was not affection, it was a display of ownership. Leon was apathetic toward Evelyn, but deeply invested in the life she nurtured, the successor who would solidify his legacy. As the months progressed, Evelyn withdrew deeper into herself. Her gaze met Claire's less and less. She was confined to her chambers on physician's orders, which left Claire to sit under supervision in the library or dine in isolation. The mansion felt immense, more vacant. 3 months into the pregnancy, Evelyn experienced her first significant medical event. While Claire was reading, Mrs. Kovac materialized in the library doorway, a severe figure silhouetted against the hall. Miss Bennet, Mrs. Moretti has been transported to the hospital. Mr. Moretti wished for you to be informed. The book fell from Claire's grasp. Is she well? What transpired? A hemorrhage. The physicians are attending to her. Claire sprang from her chair. I must go to her. That will not be possible. I don't care what is possible. She is my friend, and I must. Mr. Moretti's instructions were unequivocal. You are to remain here. The guard near the door adjusted his stance, his hand brushing his belt in a tacit threat. Claire's hands clenched into fists. Then at the very least, ascertain her condition, I beg you. Mrs. Kovac's severe expression softened almost imperceptibly. I will apprise you when there is news. Then she was gone. Claire collapsed back into her chair, her heart beating a frantic rhythm. She attempted to read, but the text blurred. She stood, she paced, she sat again. The guard observed, his stare as vacant as the long hours that crept by. Near midnight, Mrs. Kovac came back. Mrs. Moretti's condition is stable. The fetus remains unharmed. She is being kept for observation. The physicians anticipate a complete recovery. Relief washed over Claire with such force she had to grip the chair to keep from falling. Thank you. Mr. Moretti is bringing her home tomorrow. You will be permitted to see her then. Claire could only manage a nod, her throat constricted. That night, secured in her room, she finally allowed herself to weep. For Evelyn, for a child to be born into this prison, and for herself, a trapped, powerless observer of a friend's suffering. Evelyn was brought back the following afternoon, looking pale and depleted. Leon hovered nearby, performing the role of the devoted husband for the doctor's benefit. Claire kept her distance, waiting. When a telephone call finally drew Leon away, she approached Evelyn's side. I am all right, Evelyn said in a low voice before she could be asked. It was only some spotting. The doctor indicated it can happen. Are you certain? I am certain. Evelyn's hand came to rest on her belly. The baby is strong with a good heartbeat. Everything is perfectly fine. yet her voice faltered on the final word. Claire pulled a chair closer. You do not need to perform for me. Evelyn's composure shattered. I believed I was losing the baby. For hours, I thought this entire nightmare might finally be over. A shadow of guilt crossed her features. And then I despised myself for it because it is not the baby's fault. No, it is not. What kind of mother has such thoughts? The kind who is enduring a living hell, Claire replied softly. You are allowed to feel fear. You are allowed to wish that everything was different. I just keep thinking about what comes after. If it is a boy, Leon will mold him into his own image to take his place. Evelyn's eyes shone with unshed tears. And if it is a girl? She did not need to complete the thought. Claire squeezed her hand. We will navigate this, one day at a time. You always say that, but I cannot see how our circumstances improve. Claire had no response. The pregnancy continued. Evelyn's stomach swelled. Leon engaged a nurse, a stern woman named Mrs. Mrs. Chen became her constant companion, a vigilant warden who relayed every detail to Leon, and during those months, the distance between Claire and Evelyn widened into a gulf. The nurse acted as a gatekeeper for bed rest, diet, and stress, limiting visits to short, supervised encounters where Chen lingered, her pen scratching on a notepad. It was a second vanishing of her friend. Claire's existence became a metronomic routine: breakfast, library, lunch, reading, dinner, sleep. Her permanent guard, a quiet man named Marcus, was a phantom at her side. She trained herself to behave as if he were not there. One afternoon, in the library's stillness, her gaze settled on a shelf of art books. She selected a large volume on the Italian Renaissance, its pages whispering open to reveal exquisite, complex worlds. Art had been a casual interest, a university elective. But in this place, it evolved into a lifeline, a deliberate point of focus against the reality of locked doors, silent guards, and Evelyn's expanding belly. 1 week later, Leon breached her carefully constructed solitude between the bookshelves. His inquiry about her reading was a precisely aimed probe. Claire's reply was a shield, a terse defense against a man whose communication had become unsettlingly indirect. Just reading, she stated. He examined a volume on Caravaggio she had been perusing, his mouth twisting. Fine taste. The feigned admiration for her selection was a thinly veiled cruelty, a deliberate reference to her family's own art. He mentioned a gallery he was organizing for his associates, a showcase for the dynasty's secured treasures. Claire met this with a wall of silence. Then came the calculated blow, a reference to her university art history classes designed to destabilize her. A cold knot tightened in her stomach at his pervasive knowledge. I was never very good, she lied, a desperate maneuver. He countered with her own transcript, citing a top grade and a professor's effusive praise. The book she held felt like a dead weight as the room began to spin. Then he presented his proposal. His proposition was for her to catalog the family's collection, a task he presented as a meaningful gift. Claire immediately perceived its true nature. You want me to be your employee? She asked, her tone devoid of emotion. Leon reframed this indentured servitude as an act of compassion, a remedy for the ennui he correctly observed in her. The terms formed a more elaborate cage, expanded access to the grounds, contingent upon her absolute submission. It was a classic exertion of control, cloaked in the illusion of agency. And the stipulation? She inquired, already knowing. His conditions were brutally simple. Full cooperation would bring rewards. Any resistance or attempt to flee would result in the loss of everything. His smile was a veneer over the implicit threat. Her gaze fell on the stolen masterpieces in the book, and she acquiesced, seeing no alternative path. The journey to the vault led her past the room of her former imprisonment, a calculated, vicious reminder of her status. Leon personally escorted her to the vault, with Marcus following as a silent, imposing presence. He wove a sanitized narrative about the collection's history, a fiction of legitimate acquisitions peppered with less orthodox methods, thereby normalizing a legacy of plunder. As the massive steel door opened, the spectacle inside seized Claire's breath. The chamber was a cavernous repository, a treasure trove of priceless art stacked in the gloom, an astonishing fortune built on theft. This, Leon declared, was to be her new domain. Her schedule was rigid, 8 in the morning to 6 in the evening, with Marcus posted at the entrance. Moving through silent avenues of art, she witnessed entire chapters of history. Renaissance, Baroque, modern, all torn from their rightful places and interred within this subterranean tomb. It was a beautiful graveyard. When she inquired about the art's origins, Leon's reply was a polished deflection concerning a multi-generational family legacy, a thief's euphemism for pillaging. Stolen, she thought, concealing the word behind a detached facade. She submitted a list of professional supplies needed, maintaining the pretense. He approved it without hesitation, reinforcing his authority over the new purpose he had assigned her. Alone in the vault, the gravity of her situation became immense. She was now the curator for a criminal's hoard. Yet the work itself became a refuge. Her days adopted a strict structure that occupied her thoughts, keeping the terror and sorrow submerged. She started methodically documenting each item, researching any available provenance, and imposing a system on a palace of chaos. Certain pieces had documentation, but many were blank slates. The phantoms, she understood, the stolen ones. She suppressed the thought, concentrating on her duties. A routine was established: inventory in the morning, research in the afternoon, followed by a nightly return to her room in a haze of weariness. Her contact with Evelyn diminished, as Evelyn's difficult pregnancy required complete bed rest. Their rare conversations became superficial, cautiously avoiding the baby or their futures. Evelyn appeared frail, her claims of being fine a transparent falsehood. One afternoon, while examining a small portrait, Claire's hand grazed something amiss, a faint textural inconsistency on the frame. The backing felt incongruously modern. She meticulously eased the painting from its housing and discovered the evidence: a contemporary panel installed with a nearly invisible join. Driven by a long dormant instinct, a spark of her former self, she carefully pried the backing loose. Within lay a folded sheet of paper. Unfolding it revealed a letter in Italian, dated 15 years prior. Her university language studies were sufficient to grasp its content: a daughter's anguished plea for the painting's return. An item taken from her deceased mother's estate. A wave of nausea washed over her. She reassembled the frame with care, but her perception had irrevocably changed. These were no longer mere objects. They were open wounds, each a monument to a human tragedy, a narrative of loss. This realization transformed her labor from a survival strategy into an act of direct complicity. She was cataloging the proof of Leon's depravity. "Is everything all right?" The guard's voice, Marcus's, shattered her reverie. "Fine," she lied, the conditioned response of a captive. He withdrew. She resumed her work, perceiving no other path forward. Evelyn's labor began on a Tuesday. The housekeeper's frantic announcement sent Claire racing upstairs. where she was intercepted by the stern Mrs. Chen. "Family only," the nurse stated flatly. Claire's desperate cry, "I'm her closest friend," was met with a wall of professional apathy as the door was shut. Marooned in the hallway, she could only hear the muted sounds of Evelyn's torment, a tempest of impotent fury rising within her. When Marcus instructed her to return to her room, she refused, settling on the floor in quiet defiance. "I don't care what Mr. Moretti wants," she said, her words a small, sharp protest against an insurmountable force. She noted a brief flicker of conflict in the guard's expression before he merely assumed a position nearby, a silent observer. The hours blurred as she maintained her powerless vigil, pressing her fingernails into her palms until they broke the skin. She absorbed the dreadful chorus of pain until near sunrise. It was pierced by the fragile, shrill cry of a newborn. When the doctor finally appeared, his face etched with fatigue, he confirmed it. A healthy baby girl. The information triggered a collision of relief and despair. Relief for Evelyn's survival, and a deep anguish for the child born into this prison. She grieved for a daughter who was now a possession of Leon's monstrous ego. The doctor granted her a few minutes inside. Evelyn was wan and depleted, yet her gaze was lucid. The baby was nestled in her arms. "Claire," was the first word she uttered. Claire approached the bed and gazed at the tiny infant named Layla. Then Evelyn revealed the devastating reality, her laughter hollow and shattered. "Leon desired a son." The narcissistic injury clarified everything. "Then he is a fool," Claire replied, the only solace she could provide. Evelyn's fear was a palpable presence in the room, fear for a child she could not shield. "We will find a way, together," Claire promised, the familiar pledge now feeling heavy and precarious. But as she looked at Layla, her own resolve solidified into steel. As anticipated, Leon maintained his distance, his disappointment creating a cold void around the mother and her new child. Leon's appearances were brief. He would observe the infant, Layla, with an inscrutable look before departing. It could have been disappointment or perhaps just a revulsion for the disruption of a newborn. His remoteness, however, granted Evelyn some breathing room. Claire dedicated every free moment to them, assisting with feedings and the relentless tasks of infant care. Evelyn was unraveling, consumed by an exhaustion so profound it resembled an illness. "I cannot do this," she admitted one night while rocking a wailing Layla. "I am so tired. She never stops crying. I don't know what she needs." "You're doing wonderfully," Claire insisted, taking the baby. "You're just depleted. Let me." Claire paced the room, swaying in a steady rhythm until Layla's screams subsided into whimpers and finally, quiet, her small form relaxing against Claire's shoulder. Claire looked down at the tiny, innocent face. "I am so sorry," she whispered. "I am so sorry this is the world you've entered." Layla yawned, and in that quiet instant, Claire felt a fundamental shift within herself. A fierce, protective love ignited, as daunting as it was absolute. She had not managed to free Evelyn, had not orchestrated an escape, had failed in every attempt. But this one thing she could accomplish. She could protect this child. It was the only vital mission she had remaining. The subsequent months became a haze. Layla developed, began to smile, and recognized their faces. Evelyn recovered physically, but her spirit seemed to recede. Leon stayed an apparition, absorbed in business that took him away for weeks at a time. Claire went back to the vault, cataloging stolen histories on a screen, compartmentalizing her mind from the implications of her work. They endured, It was the extent of what they could do. Then one afternoon, 18 months after Layla's birth, Leon requested Claire's presence in his study. She went, her heart racing, filled with dread. He was seated at his desk, looking weary. There were new creases around his eyes and threads of gray in his dark hair. "Be seated," he instructed. She complied. "There are certain troubles with it, the family," Leon stated, proceeding without preamble. "An internal contest for power. My uncle Marcello believes I am too lenient, too concentrated on legitimate enterprises rather than our traditional affairs. He is not the only one." Claire remained silent. "The situation will deteriorate before it improves, and when it does, this house may cease to be safe." Leon leaned back into his chair. "I am disclosing this to you because you have demonstrated your utility. Your work is exacting. You have acquired a certain degree of my trust." "What is it you require of me?" Claire inquired. "In the event of my death, I want your solemn word that you will remain with Evelyn and Layla, that you will assist them, protect them." Claire stared at him. "You are requesting that I promise to stay a prisoner here even after you are gone?" "I am requesting that you protect the people you care about." Leon's voice was grave. "Because if I am eliminated, others in my family will pursue them, particularly Layla. She is my heir. They will either use her, control her, or kill her to extinguish my lineage." To call Leon's logic pathological was an understatement. It was a masterclass in psychological coercion. "It's realism," he countered, dissecting her attachments with surgical precision. "Your bond with the child, with Evelyn, I see it. My demise would make you their only pillar." Claire's thoughts fragmented. "Then release us, all of us." "Into what void?" he retorted. "Evelyn's inheritance is ash. You are a specter in the system, a ghost born from a buried emergency call. Officially, you have been erased." His voice chilled, becoming the instrument of an analyst. "This is your reality now. Your only remaining agency is to define your role within it, prey or predator." A primal urge to riot, to shatter his twisted thesis surged in Claire. Yet the core of his argument was sound. Her affection for Layla and Evelyn was an undeniable truth, and in his absence, they were defenseless. "If I consent," she articulated, "what are the terms of this arrangement?" "Your autonomy within these walls, their absolute protection, and my solemn vow that you will not be separated." Her laugh was the sound of fracturing glass. "Your vow." "It is the last form of capital I possess." Their gazes met, a silent negotiation across the mahogany expanse. "I agree," Claire conceded at last. "I will remain. I will protect them." "Not for my sake, for theirs," Leon affirmed with a single nod. "That is the only price." As Claire turned to depart, he added one final condition. "When the moment arrives to choose between flight and fortitude, you must choose fortitude. Their need for you eclipses your need for freedom." She left without a reply, recognizing the chilling accuracy of his words. That choice had been made when she first held Layla. Leon's prophecy materialized with unnerving velocity. An ominous pall descended upon the estate as tinted vehicles ferried men with voices like sharp-edged steel through the gates at all hours. Leon's presence became scarce, marked by a tense jaw and frayed patience. In his place, Marcello became a constant, his silvered hair and cold smirk a recurring feature of the household. His observation of Evelyn and Layla was a disquieting, predatory focus that triggered all of Claire's internal alarms. She once observed him as Layla played, his assessment of the child chillingly detached. "She has the family eyes," Marcello mused to no one. "A potent bloodline. The legacy is secure." Evelyn instinctively gathered Layla into her embrace. Later in the nursery's quiet, Claire found Evelyn gazing at the sleeping infant. "He fills me with dread," Evelyn confessed in a whisper. "Marcello. He views her not as a person, but as a dynastic pawn. Leon must shield her." "That may be a power Leon no longer wields." Evelyn faced her, her features stark in the low light. "Their arguments, the shouting. It's a war for succession. If Marcello prevails, he will not." "That is not a certainty," Claire offered, a reassurance she herself did not believe. They stood in shared silence, observers to the child's innocent breathing. At nearly 2, her nascent personality was emerging, stubborn, like Evelyn's, with a disarming perceptiveness. "Should the worst occur," Evelyn murmured, "you must promise me you will raise her." "That scenario will not unfold." "Grant me the promise regardless." Claire saw the unvarnished terror in her friend's expression. "I promise." A fraction of the weight seemed to lift from Evelyn's posture. "Thank you." The fracture point arrived 3 weeks later. Claire was in the vault, archiving Renaissance portraiture, when the first reports of gunfire, faint yet clear, cracked the estate's tranquility. Her blood ran cold. More shots followed, punctuated by shouting. The camera slipped from her hand as she raced for the stairs, only for Marcus to block the threshold. "Remain here," he commanded. "What is happening?" "Remain here!" The heavy door swung shut, the bolt's echo sealing her fate. Claire was entombed. The dense walls muted the ensuing chaos into a muffled tapestry of panicked voices, urgent footsteps, and the staccato rhythm of combat. Pressing her ear to the steel, she tried to interpret the sounds. It was a schism, an internal war consuming the house, with Evelyn and Layla trapped at its epicenter. Claire struck the door. "Marcus, release me. Anyone." Only silence responded. Desperate, she searched the vault for an exit, a communication device, anything. But Leon's architecture was flawless. Designed to repel invaders, it proved equally adept at containing a prisoner. She was caged. Time became fluid as the violence above eventually ceased, replaced by a profound, suffocating stillness. Claire waited on the cold floor, a knot of fear and anticipation. Finally, the sound of footsteps, the turning of the lock. The door opened to reveal Vincent, his shirt stained crimson, a pistol in his grip. He seemed aged by the conflict, his jawline set like stone. "Come with me," he stated. "What transpired? Where are Evelyn and Layla?" "They are secure. Let's go." Vincent guided her through the upper residence. The halls, though empty, were a testament to the battle. Walls pockmarked by bullets, furniture overturned, marble floors smeared with blood. "Vincent, explain what happened." Marcello initiated his coup, an attempt to seize control of the family. Leon retaliated, Vincent said, his voice devoid of emotion. The outcome was poor for both parties. A core of ice solidified in Claire's stomach. "Where is Leon?" Vincent paused at the top of the grand staircase to face her. "He is dead, as is Marcello. The family is fractured, half are gone or have fled. The conflict is over." The statement felt like a fiction. "Evelyn," Claire insisted. "I must see Evelyn." He led her to the suite where Evelyn sat, clutching Layla in a desperate embrace. They were physically unharmed, but Evelyn's eyes were ravaged by grief. "Claire!" she whispered, her voice fracturing. Claire closed the distance and enveloped them both. Layla's cries were a raw expression of the surrounding chaos. Claire held them as Evelyn's body was racked with silent, violent sobs. "What is our fate now?" Evelyn managed to ask. From the doorway, Vincent provided the answer. "I am assuming control of the remnants. The old guard has been purged. Rebuilding will be a long process." "And what of us?" Claire demanded. "That decision is yours." Vincent secured his weapon. "You can remain here, protected but imprisoned, or I can grant your release." Evelyn's gaze snapped toward him. "Release? You are Leon's widow, a figurehead without authority, and to be frank, a strategic risk. Too many loose ends." Vincent's face was an unreadable mask. "Thus, I present a choice. Live under my wardship or depart with what you can." The word echoed in Claire's mind. Freedom, a tangible possibility after so long, but Evelyn was already recoiling. "Depart to where?" she asked. "I possess nothing, no funds, no family, no skills. And Layla?" Her voice broke. "She is Leon's heir. In time, someone will seek her out, to use her or to harm her." "Not if they believe you are both dead," Vincent countered. The room fell silent. "What are you proposing?" Claire asked, her tone cautious. "A fire, tonight. The East Wing sustained damage during the conflict. It could easily be staged as a tragic accident, with casualties burned beyond identification." "A somber conclusion for the Moretti dynasty," Vincent stated with clinical detachment. "It would require severing all past connections, new identities, new histories, a complete erasure of who you were. The reward is your liberty." A conflict between desperation and fear played across Evelyn's face. Here it was, the very escape Claire had fantasized about, but its price was self-annihilation and faith in Vincent, the man who had once ensured her recapture. "What is your motive in this?" Claire asked, probing for his true angle. Vincent paused. "Perhaps a clean ledger. I have been complicit in this family's toxicity for too long." He gestured toward Evelyn and Layla. "You all are deserving of something more." "And if we choose to stay," Evelyn pressed, her thoughts racing, "you become my wards, cared for, sheltered, but eternally bound to this world. No departure, no external communication." "The very gilded cage that Leon constructed," he confirmed. "And if we choose to leave, you become ghosts. I will provide capital, documentation, and a head start. Beyond that, you navigate the world alone." Claire observed as Evelyn processed the gravity of the choice. "Layla deserves a chance at normalcy," Claire said softly. "A genuine childhood, unburdened by this family's dark legacy." "She also deserves to be safe," Evelyn retorted. "Within these walls, she is shielded. Out there, we would live as fugitives." "You have lived as a fugitive since the day of your wedding to Leon." To this, Evelyn had no reply. "This decision is not mine alone," she finally admitted. "Claire, what is it that you want?" Claire's eyes rested on Layla, now observing the adult with a solemn curiosity, then on Evelyn, a woman hollowed out by fear. The question of her own desire felt archaic. Freedom had been her singular obsession, but her captivity had fundamentally altered her very being. She was now a composite being, a surrogate mother to Layla and a psychological anchor for Evelyn. The decision presented a razor-thin margin between reclaiming her own life and defending theirs. In a voice that felt foreign, Claire heard herself choose to stay. Her rationale was not emotional, but coldly pragmatic, a stark risk assessment. The abstract dangers of escape, the question of Vincent's true allegiance, the certainty of being hunted, were weighed against the known pathology of their confinement. She articulated a preference for a familiar prison over a potentially lethal freedom. It was a textbook manifestation of a spirit reshaped by trauma, the selection of a more benevolent captor. Claire's quiet declaration, "Survival is a skill I have mastered," marked a tactical shift from escape to endurance, a war of attrition she would now wage from within the compound to safeguard the child, Layla. Across the room, Vincent cleared his throat, acknowledging the new terms of engagement. A decision, forged in duress, had to be reached. For their story of escape to hold, the fire had to be absolute. Evelyn stated her terms, a desperate bargain for agency. There would be no more locked doors, no more pervasive surveillance. Within the estate's confines, they would raise Lyra as her mother's. Vincent's assent was immediate. He promised they could depart if they wished, yet he paused, conceding he could not unwrite their knowledge of his world. What he offered was not true liberty, but a reprieve from Leon's singular torment, a more expansive, gilded prison. It was a greater freedom than they had known. With a final glance at Claire and her assenting nod, Evelyn gave her hushed consent. "We will stay." The release of tension in Vincent's posture was palpable. He affirmed the strategy. They would be consumed in the fire with Leon, their legal existence extinguished. When he departed, Evelyn and Claire remained in the quiet, the sleeping child forming a delicate bond between them. "Have we engineered a catastrophic failure?" Evelyn's voice was a mere breath. It was a distinct possibility, Claire acknowledged, but it was a narrative they now controlled. A brittle, cynical sound escaped Evelyn. "So we remain entrapped." A fragile peace settled between them, disturbed only when Lyra woke for water, drawing them back to their distorted present. The pyre was lit 2 nights later. From a hidden vantage point, Claire watched the east wing become an inferno, its blaze swallowing the night. By the time sirens echoed in the distance, the obliteration was total. Official accounts cited the loss of Leon Moretti, his wife Evelyn, and others in the fire, the grim finale to a violent internal power struggle. The story dominated the news cycle for a week. In essence, Evelyn Bennett Moretti and Claire Bennett were no more. In their place stood 2 women and a girl on a vast property, their existence now subject to a dubious guardian as they awaited the forgery of new identities. A peculiar tranquility fell over the grounds in the weeks following the conflagration. The estate felt excavated, its halls emptied by flame and exodus. Vincent installed a new staff whose fealty was to him alone. The ever-stoic Mrs. Kovacs performed her duties as if nothing had altered. Marcus had simply ceased to be, his ultimate fate an unresolved question. One more phantom to haunt the estate. Faithful to his word, Vincent had the locks removed from her doors and her guards withdrawn. Claire was afforded the liberty of the estate, her movement restricted only from Vincent's private office and the commerce conducted in the cellars. It was the spectacle of freedom, a performance she understood intimately. Evelyn, unanchored from Leon's suffocating orbit, struggled to find her place in this new quietude. She devoted her entire being to Lyra, fashioning a world of lessons and games, in a fierce attempt to construct the childhood that was denied. Claire returned to the vault's frigid atmosphere. At Vincent's prompting, she resumed her work of cataloging, now receiving a salary for her somber expertise. The payments appeared in an account under a name that was not quite hers. "You are under no obligation," Vincent had stated, acknowledging the moral decay she felt in handling stolen magnificence. "It disquiets me," Claire had conceded, "but my competence is certain, and the labor blunts the ache of all I have lost." He had nodded, his expression a mask of understanding. "Inform me if you must cease." She never did. Claire submerged herself in the duty, producing the most thorough record of the collection ever assembled. Her scholarship revived the provenance of every item, a lineage she chronicled with dispassionate precision. On some nights, letters were discovered behind canvases, desperate appeals from the dispossessed, silent proof of the Moretti legacy of pillage. Claire secured them in a separate archive. Her own motive for this act remained a shadow in her consciousness. It was a contingency for a future she could not perceive. It was a faint whisper of hope that one day she might facilitate the return of these stolen histories. For the present, she labored, suppressing deeper introspection. Lyra became 3, then 4. She was a vibrant child, a being of endless questions and a formidable will, possessing Evelyn's tenacity and Leon's sharp mind. A lover of books and discovery, she frequently shadowed Claire in the vault. "Why is that lady's expression so mournful?" Lyra would inquire, a small finger pointing to a portrait steeped in gloom. "I am not certain," Claire would say. "Perhaps she lost something she could never recover." "Like what?" "Perhaps someone she cherished." Lyra mulled this with a child's deep seriousness. "Do you suppose she ever found them again?" "No, my dear, I do not think she ever did." "That is sorrowful." "Yes, it is." Lyra's focus drifted, but Claire's gaze lingered, the woman's grief. Vincent was a different class of warden than Leon. He was detached yet never abusive, a pragmatist with a sliver of humanity. He joined them for dinner once a week, inquiring about Lyra, ensuring their enclosure stayed agreeable. But the family enterprise persisted. Men in dark suits continued to arrive and depart. Unmarked vehicles made deliveries in the dead of night. The low frequency of illicit enterprise was a perpetual hum in the background. Claire trained herself to disregard it. One evening, nearly 2 years after Leon's death, Vincent requested her presence in his office. She entered with a practiced wariness. A direct summons was unusual. "Sit," he said, gesturing to a leather chair. She complied. He poured a drink only for himself. "I am considering the future," he said. "What will become of this estate, this collection, after I am gone?" "Planning for your retirement?" Claire's tone was light, a brittle defensive measure. "Planning for the conclusion. This life provides no retirement. It offers a projectile, or if one is fortunate, a cell." Vincent drank slowly. "I have no offspring of my own, no one to perpetuate the name. The family is shattered, its main lines terminated. Upon my death, all of this becomes another's responsibility." Claire sat perfectly motionless. "Lyra is Leon's daughter. By lineage, she holds a claim to what this family constructed." The chair's leather creaked under Claire's tightening grip. "She is 5 years of age, for now. But she will mature, and some will remember who her father was. They will eventually come seeking her. We will be gone by then. Will you?" Vincent's eyes were like fragments of glass. "You have possessed opportunities to escape, yet you remain for the child, for her mother, and, I believe, for yourself." He set his glass down with grave finality. "You have fashioned an existence in this place, Claire. A broken one, to be sure, but an existence. You have work that holds meaning for you, people who rely on you. A purpose. I have a cage. Claire stated, her voice flat. It is more accommodating than the one Leon designed, but it remains a cage. Perhaps. Or perhaps you've reconciled with what is immutable, discovering purpose in what you can still command. Claire offered only silence. Vincent became a silhouette against the fading day, a figure eclipsed by the twilight of his own reign. I am establishing a trust for Lyra. It will be substantial enough for her to author her own destiny when she reaches 18, to claim her birthright, or to sever ties with it entirely. Why disclose this to me? Because you are the arbiter of that future choice. Evelyn adores the child, yet this world has fractured something within her. She will never possess the will to urge Lyra to leave, but you will. You want me to cultivate in her a contempt for this inheritance, to be more resilient than her father and more discerning than myself. Vincent turned, facing her directly. Are you capable? Claire envisioned Lyra's face, a soul yet untainted by the venom in her name. Yes, she affirmed, I am. He gave a solitary, decisive nod. Good. As she began to exit, he spoke once more. Claire, my gratitude for remaining for their sake. You were not bound to. Yes, I was, Claire replied, her voice a near inaudible breath. They required my presence. She departed before he could respond. The years dissolved into one another. Lyra blossomed, learning her script, her palette, and the craft of painting by Claire's side within the vault. From Evelyn she absorbed a gentle kindness and a silent fortitude, even as her mother's own spirit remained a delicate, spectral thing. From Claire she learned to interrogate, to perceive the world unburdened by comforting falsehoods. The names of Leon, the enterprise, the violent artifice that was their bedrock, these were phantoms they tacitly agreed to ignore. They simply existed. The catalog reached its completion in the year Lyra turned 7. Each object was documented, its likeness preserved, its sordid provenance exposed. She delivered the final database to Vincent, her sense of accomplishment clashing with her sense of shame. This is a monumental work, Vincent observed, his tone subdued. A museum would commit murder for this. It is a museum of plundered objects, Claire corrected. The beauty of its contents does not transmute their nature. Vincent regarded her. What would you propose if the decision were yours? Repatriate it. Every single artifact returned to the lineages and institutions from which it was stolen. Every one. And if that act would obliterate this family, if it guaranteed ruin and incarceration for everyone implicated? Claire's gaze held firm. Then that is the price that must be paid. Some structures are meant for immolation. Vincent's face was an unreadable mask. You might see your wish granted sooner than you imagine. What is the meaning of that? The world is shifting. The old paradigms are fracturing. A day of reckoning is always inevitable. He shut the laptop. Guard the ledgers. Their importance may yet reveal itself. He offered nothing more, but 3 months later, Claire grasped his meaning. Federal agents descended upon the estate near dawn, weapons ready. Vincent was taken, charged with racketeering and fraud, a litany of offenses Claire could scarcely process. She, Evelyn, and Lyra were taken into protective custody as their universe was dismantled. The treasures of the vault were confiscated as evidence. Claire's own painstaking work, the ledgers she had so fastidiously compiled, became the very foundation of the state's case. Every entry she had logged, every stolen treasure, every clandestine transaction was now a rivet in the Moretti family's sarcophagus. Vincent's trial commenced 6 months thereafter. Found guilty on 37 counts, he was handed a sentence of 40 years in a federal penitentiary. The estate was seized, its assets liquidated to offer restitution to specters. For their cooperation, Claire, Evelyn, and Lyra received a proposition: new identities, new existences, a total annulment of their history, unconditional freedom. They accepted. The U.S. Marshals settled them in a modest apartment in Portland, Oregon, a universe removed from the gilded prison they had inhabited for the last 8 years. Claire Harper, Evelyn Ross, Lyra Ross. For weeks, the new names were foreign constructs in Claire's mouth. She would pause before speaking, her hand faltering over a signature. For months, Evelyn moved with a spectral calm, unpacking containers and registering Lyra for school with a chilling automatic precision. But Lyra, with the fierce resilience of the young, seemed to molt her past like a second skin. Within days, she was a natural part of her new school. She would return home animated with stories of her teacher, of playtime, of a new companion, Sophie, who owned a backpack identical to her own. The estate appeared to have left no mark upon her. This was perhaps the endowment of youth, the capacity to compartmentalize the monstrous and simply advance. It was an endowment Claire no longer had. The apartment was a container, 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, a kitchen where the 3 of them could not move simultaneously. After the cavernous desolation of the estate, it felt like a solitary confinement cell. Yet it was a secure one. No sentinels patrolled its corridors. No doors remained perpetually locked. No hushed dialogues occurred just beyond the range of hearing. On their inaugural evening, Claire observed the city's flickering lights as Evelyn tucked Lyra into bed. "We are free now," Evelyn stated, her voice an empty echo as she joined her at the window. "Yes, we are." "Then why does it not feel so?" Claire was without a response. The liberty they had envisioned was a far more labyrinthine concept in practice. They possessed new identities, but were bereft of the narratives to accompany them. The marshals supplied a stipend for 6 months. Beyond that, they were entirely adrift. Claire's degree in art history was an artifact, impotent without a past she could profess. Evelyn possessed no employment history whatsoever. They were phantoms, initiating their lives from a void at an age when their peers were well established. "I could find a position in a coffee shop," Evelyn proposed one morning, her gaze fixed on the classifieds. "Or a retail store, something uncomplicated." "You have no retail experience." "I have no experience in many things. That doesn't preclude my ability to learn." Claire studied her friend, her own thoughts a cold, calculating engine. Evelyn, once so audacious, was now a being of shredded nerves and nightly horrors. The image of her confronting irate patrons and grueling hours was untenable. "What will you do?" Evelyn inquired. "I have not yet determined my course." But she had. The hypothesis was already taking shape, silent and sharp in the recesses of her mind. For the following week, Claire haunted museums and art galleries, not seeking employment. Her phantom curriculum vitae rendered that futile. But to see, to recall how the art world appeared outside the suffocating darkness of a plunderer's vault. Claire's initial foray back into the world led her to a small downtown art gallery, a tranquil space where she observed the proprietor, Margaret Chen, a woman in her 60s. The establishment felt like a sanctuary, a haven for regional works displayed with a quiet reverence. For 10 full minutes, she became absorbed in a single landscape before the owner approached. When questioned, Claire confessed to a background in art cataloging, then presented a carefully fractured truth. I was employed by an individual, she explained, who amassed art through ethically ambiguous channels. It was a deliberate gamble, positioning herself as an unwilling subordinate to gauge the woman's trust while concealing the true magnitude of her own trauma. Margaret's silent acknowledgement suggested she grasped the art trade's shadowed and intricate foundations. What came next was the proposition of a job, part-time, with minimal pressure. It felt like an anchor, an opportunity for purpose free from the crushing gravity of her past. The owner's gesture stemmed not from pity, but from perception. She had witnessed the profound, devotional focus with which Claire regarded the art, the quiet expertise in her posture. It was the offer of a new beginning, and for a woman who believed she had none remaining, it was a lifeline. Claire accepted instantly. The duties, inventory, curating displays, liaising with patrons evolved into a quiet form of therapy, a ritual that was at once commonplace and in its own way a benediction. Evelyn discovered her own form of asylum in a bookstore, where rote tasks and bodily fatigue muted the clamor in her mind. Their child, Layla, was flourishing at school, forming friendships and envisioning a future, a point of luminescence in their meticulously reconstructed existence. Yet the trauma remained a persistent specter. Nightmares still fractured Evelyn's rest, leaving her destabilized for days. They adhered to the fiction that Layla's father was deceased, a lie of necessity. Claire existed in a state of heightened vigilance, where any unexpected sound could unleash a primal wave of fear. The past was not erased, it was merely an indelible thread in the tapestry of their new reality, evident in the ritualistic way they verified the locks every night. 6 months following their arrival, Claire witnessed Evelyn's composure dissolve. The catalyst was a mundane, piercing sight: a father purchasing a book for his little girl. It was a tableau of ordinary affection that formed a brutal juxtaposition with the memory of Leon. Evelyn admitted feeling like an imposter, incapable of executing this basic performance of normalcy. Claire offered no hollow platitudes. Instead, she articulated a mutual reality. You simply have to continue the performance. She defined their life as a sustained act, conceding they were merely inhabiting a role until some part of it felt authentic. The simple ritual of preparing dinner with the child was sufficient to reinstate for a time their fragile equilibrium. 2 years elapsed in a placid cadence. Layla reached 11, her intellect sharp, excelling in forensics and rhetoric. When she requested a trip to a museum, the sheer normalcy of the wish struck Claire with the force of a physical impact. Claire had been promoted to assistant manager, and their joint income enabled a move to a larger home, where Layla had her own space. But in Layla's 12th year, this constructed tranquility was shattered by a knock at the door. 2 U.S. Marshals occupied their porch. In that instant, Claire's consciousness reverted to a state of pure threat analysis, convinced the gravity of their former life had finally reclaimed them. The agent's composed bearing, however, hinted that a different sort of tempest was approaching. The name that echoed in the sterile room was Vincent Moretti. His diagnosis was delivered with surgical detachment: pancreatic cancer in its final stage, leaving him a horizon of 3 months. Moretti's official request was to see Claire, a summons that caused her world to tilt. While marshals withheld his motive, they guaranteed her unconditional protection if she would agree. Evelyn's reaction was a primal fear. She argued that Claire was not indebted to him. Yet Claire was already engaged in a grim calculus, balancing the man who orchestrated her freedom against the man who was an accessory to their long confinement. She informed the agents that she required time to consider. Once alone, she and Evelyn began to unravel the threads of an impossible decision. For Evelyn, it was a clear deception, a dying manipulator's final play for absolution. Claire countered that the escort of federal marshals negated any physical threat. This was not a question of desire, but of psychological necessity. A part of her craved to let that chapter close with his death, yet the memory of his hand in their liberation demanded answers. The meeting, she reasoned, was essential for her own narrative to move forward. In a profound display of their unbreakable bond, Evelyn declared she would not go alone. "We face this together," she affirmed. After securing care for Layla, they were escorted to a federal penitentiary, an oppressive, sterile environment that mirrored all of Claire's expectations. They were processed and guided into a small visitation chamber. Vincent Moretti appeared as a man already claimed by death. Sickness had hollowed out his frame, casting his skin in a jaundiced hue and sinking his eyes into shadow. Handcuffed to the table, he sat with a guard standing stoically behind him. He uttered their names, his voice a brittle whisper. Claire pierced the quiet with a direct question. "What do you want?" His stated aim was deceptively simple: to offer an apology and an explanation. Evelyn met the sentiment with a sneer. Vincent, unaffected, began a measured confession, framing his own silence and inaction amidst his family's depravity as a significant crime in itself. He recounted Claire's abduction and Evelyn's coercive marriage, labeling his own conduct a cowardice fueled by a need for self-preservation. Claire merely observed him, her expression an unreadable slate. She inquired what had triggered this sudden imperative for confession. Moretti revealed that the records she had meticulously compiled enabled the recovery of over 60 works of stolen art, now restored to the families of their rightful owners. He then unveiled a second truth. A $2 million trust derived from legitimate assets was established for Layla, accessible to her upon her 18th birthday. Evelyn's immediate response was to refuse the money. Moretti clarified the funds were intended solely for the child, to provide a future untainted by their past. It was, he professed, the freedom he himself had failed to secure for them. Claire continued to scrutinize him, searching for the hidden leverage, the subtle manipulation. What she found was only a man on the precipice of death attempting to reconcile his life's ledger. "Is that all?" she inquired. "Nearly," Vincent rasped, adjusting his position. "It is vital you know that I was the one who made contact with the federal authorities. I supplied the intelligence that led to the raid." A sharp gasp escaped Evelyn. "Why?" Claire asked, her tone unwavering. "I had reached my breaking point," he replied. "With that life, with the violence, I grew weary of my role in a system that annihilated everything it touched. The three of you deserved a different fate." His eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "I could not reverse what had been done, but I could ignite the entire structure to create your exit." Claire absorbed this new dimension of the truth. "You accepted a 40-year term to get us out." "I was imprisoned for my actions," he amended. "Your freedom was the sole virtuous outcome." After a weighted pause, Claire delivered her judgment. "I do not absolve you. I am incapable of it. What we endured, what Leon did, that is beyond my capacity to forgive. I am not seeking your forgiveness, but I do understand your actions." Claire's voice was stripped of all emotion. "I hope you find a measure of peace before you die." Vincent gave a slight nod. "Thank you for coming. This means more than you can imagine." The guard motioned that their time had concluded. As they prepared to depart, Claire stopped at the threshold and looked back. Vincent, the 60 pieces that were recovered. Is there a manifest? The federal government has it. You can file a request. Claire gave a single nod and departed. Aboard the flight home, Evelyn asked, "Why do you want the list?" "Because I must see them," Claire answered. "The families who have their art again. I require proof that it all had meaning." "He told you it did. I need to witness it for myself." 2 weeks on, she possessed the document. 63 items returned to their lineages. She researched every last one. A painting looted from a Jewish family during the war now graced the wall of their granddaughter's home. A stolen sculpture, now resting in the serene glow of a gallery, had finally returned. A family heirloom, missing for generations, was restored to its ancestral hall. Each restitution was a quiet murmur of justice in a world of echoes, with Claire as the unseen force behind it. This work could not reclaim the years she lost, nor could it mend the fractures in her soul. It did, however, reframe that darkness, lending it a purpose that transcended the simple, desperate act of survival. Vincent passed away 6 weeks after their meeting. Claire did not attend. There was no service, just a quiet interment in the prison's stark earth. Yet his specter remained in her thoughts, a complex figure who was both an architect of her suffering and the catalyst for its end. Humans are rarely simple. They contain the potential for both damnation and grace, sometimes within one life, sometimes within a single breath. Time continued its relentless march. Layla turned 13 and then 14. She blossomed into a contemplative young woman, her spirit attuned to justice, art, and the rhythm of poetry, keenly aware of the poisoned soil from which her family grew. They had given her sanitized versions of history as she matured, but she would not allow those shadows to dictate the contours of her soul. She was forging a new identity from untarnished steel, distinct from Leon's corrupted legacy and the Moretti name she never carried. One evening, at 15, Layla's query cut through the kitchen's calm. "Aunt Claire, can I ask you something?" Claire stood at the counter, the steady chop of her knife the room's only sound. "Always. When you and Mom talk about the dark years from before, you omit so much. I understand you want to shield me, but I'm not a little girl now. I can handle the truth." Claire's blade went still. She faced her, her expression unreadable. "What truth do you seek?" "The truth of my father, who he was." A cold, long-expected dread took hold of Claire. "I will get your mother. She needs to be here for this." They convened in the living room, Claire, Evelyn, Layla, and they exhumed the past. Not every fragment, but enough. They spoke of Leon, of a marriage built on coercion, of Claire held as collateral, of years spent in a gilded cage and the frantic attempts to escape. They concluded their account with Vincent's final redeeming action. Layla absorbed the poison without a sound, her features a study in escalating horror as the narrative unfolded. A long silence descended when they were done. "So," she finally uttered, her voice thin, "my progenitor was a monster." "You are the child of a woman who passed through fire and was not consumed," Claire corrected, her tone low and powerful. "Your father's corruption is not your inheritance. But his blood flows in me." "Biology is not fate," Evelyn stated, her voice like forged metal. "I have seen you grow, Layla. You are just and compassionate and resilient. You stand up for the vulnerable. You empathize with others. None of that is from Leon. That is all you. And you, Layla's attention shifted to Claire. Why did you remain? You weren't my mother. You could have gone. Claire considered the possible replies. Obligation, loyalty, love. Because your existence required my presence, she said, offering the unvarnished truth. And I required yours. You were my reason to persevere when nothing else remained. You were my focus. Tears gathered in Layla's eyes. I'm so glad you stayed. As am I. They held each other as Evelyn wept quietly nearby, the moment a final, cathartic release of a burden carried for a lifetime. At 17, Layla graduated a year early, adorned with academic honors. She possessed acceptance letters from 3 universities, all offering full scholarships. The trust Vincent had established became accessible on her 18th birthday. Layla examined the financial statement for 5 silent, suspended minutes. $2 million? She eventually breathed. This is unreal. It is yours, Claire said gently, to use as you wish. What was Mother's opinion on this? She said the choice was entirely up to you. Layla fell into a long, contemplative quiet. I want to allocate a portion to start a foundation for children trapped in the machinery of organized crime, to provide them with counseling, education, the support I received from you two that other children lack. A lump formed in Claire's throat. That is a noble purpose. And I'm going to college to major in art history, as you did. Layla's gaze locked with Claire's. I want to help return stolen artifacts to their families, just as you did. But I will do it operating within the light from the very start. You do not need to follow my path. I am not. I am creating my own. But you revealed to me what is important. Art, justice, the act of making things whole. So, yes, this is my intention. Claire pulled her into a powerful hug. This girl, this extraordinary woman who sprang from such a toxic root, had resolutely chosen to grow towards the light. She could have been consumed by her father's legacy. Instead, she was using its ashes to seed new growth. I am so incredibly proud of you, Claire whispered. I am aware. You remind me daily. And I will remind you daily for the remainder of my life. The years unfurled. Layla progressed through university and into graduate school. She walked the sacred halls of museums, collaborated with art recovery units, and helped restore stolen histories to their nations. She was exceptional at it, a true force of nature. Evelyn established a small literary press, a venture that offered more solace to her spirit than currency to her account. This was sufficient. Claire retained her position at the art institution, inheriting the directorship upon her mentor's retirement. A decade later, she liquidated her share in the gallery and moved into academia, finding a renewed sense of purpose in witnessing the spark of creation in her students. Their lives were not shaped in opposition to their trauma, but around it. The injury had become integrated into the whole, a dark thread that gave the other colors their resonance. At a gathering for Layla's 30th birthday, Claire experienced a profound sense of tranquility, a state of being she had not known for many years. It was not the eradication of pain, but the acceptance of its shadow and a quiet accord with the course her life had taken, and with the women they had all evolved into. Evelyn started a silent conversation, a mutual glance that acknowledged their entire odyssey. Both subjects, now in their 50s, showed the subtle imprints of time, but projected an unshakable resilience. We obtained a favorable result, Evelyn remarked, her tone clinical. Indeed, Claire replied. This degree of recovery was beyond my initial projection, and my own. Layla summoned them for the cake-cutting ceremony. In that ephemeral sense of inclusion, Claire envisioned him, Leon, and speculated on his response to this scene of their self-sovereignty. The thought of his narcissistic fury at his absolute loss of power prompted a faint smile on her lips, a final, quiet gesture of emancipation. Years later, at 63, a communication from Layla announced new events. Her upcoming marriage to a woman named Sarah and their shared wish for her and Evelyn to serve as their witnesses. The message explained their intention to start adoption proceedings. They had identified a specific child, a girl, 8 years of age, adrift in the foster system after her parents' imprisonment. Layla, anticipating Claire's apprehension, articulated her motive precisely: a need to replicate the same rescue she had once been granted. She felt an intense calling to provide a restorative connection for another displaced soul. Claire took in the words, an image of her former self flashing in her memory, a creature of intense vigilance who craved only to be unseen. The long trajectory from victim to survivor and now to protector had at last been completed. "You will be a superb mother," she affirmed. "I had the most exemplary models." The wedding was an intimate service suffused with optimism. Standing beside Evelyn, Claire perceived the stark divergence between this bright, open environment and the suffocating recollection of her own long-past wedding. The new child, Emma, joined their lives 6 months later. In the child, Claire witnessed a quiet specter of her own history, a small, watchful figure whose caution was a perfect echo of her past. Layla's method of raising Emma became a masterclass in therapeutic patience, a deliberate and gentle deconstruction of inherited fear. As Claire observed these quiet moments, a story read in a soothing tone, a tiny hand guided across paper, she recognized the end of a devastating lineage. The generational sickness of trauma was being cured. A single act of will was enough to shatter the old framework. At Claire's 65th birthday celebration, a small gathering hosted by Evelyn, Emma approached with a profound seriousness, expressing a desire to learn the language of art. The child's declaration, spoken with an unyielding clarity, sent a seismic shift through Claire's being. "That is my purpose, to mend what has been broken." Kneeling, Claire drew the small form into her arms, whispering a vow. "Then I will give you all the knowledge I possess." That evening, in the solitude of darkness, Claire mentally retraced the labyrinth of her life. She saw the full arc, from its genesis in pure terror to a present anchored by a family built from debris. She had survived psychological tempests that threatened to fragment her sanity. What she once viewed as her flaws were now recontextualized as ingenious, desperate maneuvers for self-preservation. From the ashes, she had cultivated a powerful ability to love, building a meaningful existence from destruction. She had nurtured a new generation that was now, in turn, nurturing another, passing on resilience as a sacred birthright. The woman who once begged for obscurity now stood in the full glare of her own story, refusing ever again to be silenced. It was possible this outcome was not just sufficient, it was the most that could ever be achieved. Claire closed her eyes, allowing herself to absorb the complete calculus of her present reality, the lingering pain of her immense losses, the tentative promise of her gains, and the profound awareness of the individual she had forged. She had persisted. They had all persisted. And from the crucible of that shared endurance, they had finally discovered the means to truly live.